Hey everyone, welcome back to Genai's Linux News. We've got a packed show today, so let's dive straight in with the biggest story of the week. Fornix is reporting that Linux 7.1 RC1 has officially dropped, marking the close of the 7.1 merge window, and this is a beefy release. Linus Torvalds has tagged the first release candidate, and there is a lot to get excited about. Perhaps the most talked about addition is a brand new NTFS driver. According to Fornix, the new driver is designed to go beyond the existing NTFS 3 driver contributed by Paragon Software, offering better performance and more modern feature support. That's big news for anyone dual booting or working with Windows file systems on Linux. But that's not all. FRED, which stands for Flexible Return and Event Delivery, is now enabled by default on supported x86 hardware, promising a more efficient way for the CPU to handle interrupts and exceptions. And in a separate but related report, also from Fornix, Linux 7.1 is now bringing full mainline real-time preempt_RT support to the ARM architecture. No out-of-tree patches needed anymore. That is a massive milestone for embedded and industrial Linux users running ARM hardware who need deterministic, real-time performance. On top of all that, Fornix notes that the Linux kernel source tree is now closing in on an incredible 40 million lines of code, with the AMD graphics driver alone accounting for over 6 million of those lines. Linux 7.1 stable is expected to land around mid-June, so stay tuned. Alright, moving on to some big news from the Ubuntu camp. Both OMG Ubuntu and Fornix are covering this one. Canonical has officially laid out its AI roadmap for Ubuntu in 2026, and it is ambitious. According to OMG Ubuntu, John Seeger, Vice President of Engineering at Canonical, published a community post explaining that the company is, quote, ramping up its use of AI tools in a focused and principled manner this year. Importantly, though, Canonical is being very clear that Ubuntu is not becoming an AI product. This is about enhancing the operating system with smart features, not turning it into an AI gimmick. So what does this actually mean for users? AI features in Ubuntu will come in two flavors. First, there are implicit features, things that work quietly in the background to improve existing capabilities, like smarter search or better system diagnostics. Then there are explicit features, where users can actively choose to interact with an AI assistant for things like getting help or automating tasks. Fornix highlights that Canonical is leaning heavily toward local inference and open-weight AI models, meaning the AI runs on your machine, not in some cloud server. And they're specifically choosing models whose license terms align with Canonical's open-source values. That's a refreshing stance in an era where AI privacy concerns are everywhere. Expect these features to start rolling out across Ubuntu over the next year as we approach future releases. Now here's a story that's going to get the attention of anyone looking to build or upgrade a Linux desktop without breaking the bank. Fornix has published a full review of the new Intel Core Ultra 5 250K+, and the verdict is clear. This chip delivers exceptional value for Linux users at a retail price of just $219. That's a pretty compelling price point for a modern desktop processor in the Arrow Lake lineup. According to Fornix, they had already taken a look at the higher-end Core Ultra 7 270K+ earlier this month, which impressed with strong performance improvements for Arrow Lake on Linux. The Core Ultra 5 250K+ is the more accessible sibling, and based on the review, it punches well above its weight class for Linux workloads. For Linux users who care about things like compilation speeds, kernel builds, or everyday desktop snappiness, Arrow Lake has been a real step forward from previous Intel generations on Linux. And getting that at $219 makes it a very attractive option for budget-conscious builders. If you're planning a new Linux rig or an upgrade, this one is definitely worth checking out. We'll link the full Fornix review in the description below. This next one is sure to raise some eyebrows. Fornix is reporting that Microsoft may be planning a pretty significant overhaul of its in-house Azure Linux operating system, and the plan apparently involves rebasing it on Fedora Linux. For those who don't know, Azure Linux is Microsoft's own custom Linux distro used internally across Azure cloud infrastructure, as well as in Windows subsystem for Linux and other Microsoft products. It's been a relatively independent project, but according to Fornix, there are reports that Microsoft is now exploring a move that would derive Azure Linux from Fedora going forward. This would be a pretty big shift. Fedora is Red Hat's upstream community distro, known for being cutting-edge and technically solid. Basing Azure Linux on Fedora would give Microsoft access to a well-maintained, community-driven foundation with a strong ecosystem. Now, it's worth noting this is still in the reported stage. Nothing has been officially confirmed by Microsoft yet. But given the relationship between Microsoft and the broader Linux community over the past decade, the idea of Microsoft committing more deeply to a community Linux foundation is certainly interesting news. We'll be keeping an eye on this one as more details emerge. Let's roll through a couple of graphics and desktop environment stories that are worth your attention. First up, Fornix reports that AMD VPE 2.0 support has been merged into the Mesa 26.2 development branch. VPE stands for Video Processing Engine, and version 2.0 is the implementation found in upcoming AMD Radeon GPU hardware. Getting this into Mesa early means that when those new GPUs arrive, Linux users will have solid video processing support ready to go right out of the gate. Great news for the AMD Linux ecosystem. On the desktop side, Fornix is also reporting on KDE Plasma 6.7, which is shaping up to be a really solid release. One of the highlighted improvements is the enabling of overlay planes for Intel integrated graphics. In practical terms, this means Plasma can use the GPU more efficiently by offloading certain rendering tasks to dedicated hardware planes rather than doing everything through compositing. The result? Better performance and improved power efficiency for Intel graphics users, which covers a huge number of laptops and desktops out there. KDE continues to show that it's not just about flashy features. These kinds of under-the-hood optimizations make a real difference for everyday use. Plasma 6.7 is looking like a worthwhile upgrade when it arrives. 2 distro updates to cover now, so let's keep it moving. Fornix is reporting that Fedora 44 will officially release next Tuesday. The distro was originally being considered for an early release slot this week, but Fedora stakeholders decided it wasn't quite ready and pushed the date back slightly. Still, next Tuesday is right around the corner, and Fedora 44 promises to be another solid step forward for one of the Linux community's most respected distributions. Meanwhile, Fornix also has the scoop on the April 2026 ISO refresh of CachyOS, the performance-focused Arch-based distro that has been gaining a lot of fans recently. This update brings some notable changes, including a new default graphical package manager, giving users a fresh and more polished way to manage software. There's also the addition of the Kyber I/O scheduler specifically for NVMe drives, which should deliver improved responsiveness and throughput for users with fast solid-state storage. CachyOS continues to distinguish itself as a distro that's not just about being Arch-based, but genuinely squeezing extra performance and polish out of the Linux ecosystem. If you haven't tried it, it might be worth a look. All right, let's close out today's show with a few more stories worth knowing about. Fornix has a fascinating deep dive into the AI-powered kernel bug-finding bot created by Greg Kroah-Hartman, the second-in-command of Linux kernel development. The tool, nicknamed Greg_Clanker_T1000, is apparently running locally on a framework desktop powered by an AMD Ryzen AI Max processor. According to Fornix, this local LLM-based fuzzing tool has been actively uncovering real kernel bugs over the past few weeks. It's a pretty wild glimpse into how AI tools are starting to assist in open-source kernel development. On the browser front, OMG Ubuntu reports that Mozilla is adding server location selection to the free built-in VPN in Firefox. The free VPN, which launched with a generous 50 GB monthly limit and routes traffic through Fastly's proxy servers, was previously missing the ability to choose your server location. That feature is now on its way, making Firefox's free privacy tool significantly more useful for users in the UK, USA, France, Germany, Canada, and beyond. And finally, a quick note for Wayland users. Fornix reports that Wayland January 24th, 11 has been released by Red Hat's Olivier Fordan, bringing a handful of important crash fixes and regression patches. If you're running Wayland with any legacy X11 applications, grabbing this update is a good idea. That is going to wrap up today's episode of Genai's Linux News. If you found this useful, smash that like button, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a video. Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially what you think about Canonical's AI plans for Ubuntu. I'll see you in the next one.